The life stream did not ask permission. It never had. Not when it swallowed the dying, not when it breathed life into the newborn, not when it tore a man from everything he knew and flung him sideways through the fabric of existence itself. Cloud Strife had survived Sephiroth twice. He had survived Geostigma, survived the weight of Aerith's absence, survived the particular cruelty of living past people you loved. He had not, until this moment, considered that survival might someday mean hurtling through a screaming corridor of green light with absolutely no idea where or when the exit was. He hit the Normandy's hull at roughly the speed of a bad decision. The impact crater he left in the SR-2's outer plating would become a point of contention between Joker and the engineering team for weeks. The pilot's initial report to Commander Shepard described it as a person-shaped dent, which was technically accurate and entirely insufficient. Cloud had driven the Buster Sword into the hull on instinct, pure soldier reflex, and the blade held, anchoring him against the void, while his vision cleared and his lungs remembered their purpose. Stars, but wrong. The constellations made no sense. The stellar density was off, and two of the shapes drifting at his 4 o'clock were distinctly, unmistakably mechanical in a way that organic space debris simply wasn't. Massive, ancient, wrong. His Mako-enhanced eyes adjusted fast. The ship beneath him was enormous, sleek, human-built from the look of the architecture, but the materials were unfamiliar. Whatever alloy composed the hull vibrated faintly against his palm, like the hull itself carried a residual charge. He could feel it through his glove. He had approximately 45 seconds before the airlock behind him cycled open. If you want to see more characters collide with universes they were never meant to enter, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name and a universe in the comments below. Let's build every crossover worth telling. Inside the Normandy, every proximity alarm EDI possessed was screaming simultaneously. Joker yanked his headset off and stared at his console with the expression of a man whose morning had taken an unacceptable turn. The external camera feed showed a figure in dark armor, massive sword buried in the hull plating, one knee braced against the curve of the ship, staring out at the terminus systems like he was mildly annoyed by them. "Shepard," Joker's voice was admirably steady. "We have someone on the hull, and I mean on the hull, not attached via grapple, not in a suit, just on it, holding a sword the size of a door." Garrus was already moving before Shepard finished reading the alert. Cloud felt the airlock cycle. He pulled the Buster Sword free with a sound like tearing metal and turned to face whatever came next. Behind the opening pressure seal, he counted 4 figures in body armor, weapons raised, a blue shimmer of energy crackling at the fingertips of one. His eyes went flat and calm, the way they always did when a fight became inevitable. He didn't recognize the weapons, he didn't recognize the armor, he didn't recognize a single thing about any of this. He settled his grip on the Buster Sword anyway. Some variables were universal. Garrus Vicarian had faced down mercenary battalions, rogue specters, and one very unpleasant encounter with a thresher maw that he preferred not to discuss. He had not previously faced a human-shaped individual who deflected a shotgun blast with a sword the size of a dining table and looked irritated about it. The slug hit the flat of the blade with a resonant clang and caromed into the corridor wall. Cloud hadn't moved his feet. "Stop shooting!" Shepard's order cut through the standoff with the particular authority she'd developed somewhere between dying and coming back angrier. Garrus lowered his mantis. Miranda's fingers stayed lit with biotic charge, but her arm dropped a fraction. Jacob's hand tightened on his shotgun, and then, reading the room, relaxed. Cloud's eyes moved across each of them in turn, cataloging. He'd spent enough time around dangerous people to recognize the specific tension of a team deciding whether to switch from containment to elimination. These 4 were on that edge. He lowered the Buster Sword, not all the way, just enough to signal he understood the language of standing down without committing to it. "Where," he said, "am I?" The question seemed to disarm Miranda more effectively than the blade had. She'd clearly prepared for threats, for demands, possibly for something requiring her biotic field at full capacity. She had not prepared for exhausted pragmatism. Shepard stepped forward past her crew. She looked at Cloud the way Cloud had occasionally looked at things that defied explanation, directly, without flinching, cataloging the details, the enormous sword, the armor, the eyes which were glowing faintly in a way that registered immediately as not standard human augmentation. "Commander Shepard," she said, "this is the Normandy SR-2. You're in the Terminus systems, about 12 hours from the Omega-4 relay." None of those words meant anything to Cloud. His expression didn't change, which Shepard later told Garrus she found more unsettling than if he'd panicked. "The sword goes in the cargo hold," she said. "You come with me. Nobody shoots anyone." She turned and walked back down the corridor with the confidence of someone who'd decided the situation was resolved because she'd decided it was resolved. Cloud watched her go. He looked at Garrus, who shrugged one shoulder in a gesture that communicated, "I know, I've seen it before, just follow her," with impressive efficiency for someone without a human face. Cloud followed. EDI tracked him through every camera in a ship simultaneously. His biometrics were extraordinary and immediately problematic. The Mako compound saturating his bloodstream registered as neither toxin nor enhancement on any framework she possessed. His muscle density was consistent with someone who had been rebuilt at the cellular level. The sword was composed of materials she couldn't identify from passive scanning alone, and the cylindrical objects attached to his bracer, 7 of them, different colors, faintly luminescent, emitted an energy signature that made her sensor array deliver what could only be described as a confused result. She filed 17 separate anomaly reports in the time it took him to reach Shepard's cabin. She would file more before the day was done. EDI's voice found Cloud in the cargo hold at 0300 ship time, which was when the Normandy's night cycle dimmed the corridor lights and most of the crew stopped pretending to be calm about their new passenger. "You are not sleeping," she observed. Cloud was sitting on a supply crate with the buster sword across his knees, running a whetstone along the blade in long, even strokes. The sound filled the hold with a steady, meditative rhythm. "Neither are you." "I do not sleep. I am an artificial intelligence." A pause. "Though I appreciate the implied symmetry." Another pause, slightly shorter. "I have been attempting to complete a biological workup from the medical scan Dr. Chakwas performed while you were unconscious following your arrival. I am encountering difficulties." "What kind?" "The compound saturating your musculature and nervous system does not correspond to any known human augmentation protocol. It is not a biotic implant. It is not a Cerberus modification. It predates any enhancement program in my database by a margin I cannot calculate because I cannot identify its origin." EDI's tone remained level, but there was something underneath it that a human might have called fascinated. "Your cellular regeneration rate is also anomalous. The bruising from your hull impact has reduced by 63% in 4 hours. Cloud said nothing for a moment. The whetstone kept moving. "It's called Mako," he said finally. "It's planetary energy. Processed, concentrated, introduced during augmentation. It changes the body." He turned the blade, checked the edge. "Doesn't always change it well. The luminescence in your eyes is a side effect." "One of them." EDI processed this. "The objects on your bracer also emit an anomalous energy signature. The Normandy's drive core contains element 0, which generates mass effect fields when exposed to electrical current. Your devices appear to interact with the ESO trace particulates in the ship's atmosphere. In the 6 hours since your arrival, the interaction has been intensifying. Cloud looked down at the materia slots on his bracer. The orbs were glowing slightly brighter than usual, particularly the green restore materia and the yellow ultima materia, both of which were pulsing with an irregularity he didn't like. He'd noticed it. He hadn't said anything yet because he hadn't known what it meant. "It's called Mako," he said finally. "It's planetary energy. Processed, concentrated, introduced during augmentation. It changes the body." He turned the blade, checked the edge. "Doesn't always change it well. The luminescence in your eyes is a side effect." "One of them." "EDI processed this. The objects on your bracer also emit an anomalous energy signature. The Normandy's drive core contains element 0, which generates mass effect fields when exposed to electrical current. Your devices appear to interact with the ESO trace particulates in the ship's atmosphere. In the 6 hours since your arrival, the interaction has been intensifying." Cloud looked down at the materia slots on his bracer. The orbs were glowing slightly brighter than usual, particularly the green restore materia and the yellow ultima materia, both of which were pulsing with an irregularity he didn't like. He'd noticed it. He hadn't said anything yet because he hadn't known what it meant. "If the interaction keeps intensifying," he asked Cloud. "I don't know," EDI said. "That is not a phrase I use frequently or comfortably." Shepard appeared at the cargo hold entrance before Cloud could respond, in civilian clothes, clearly also not sleeping, with the particular look of a commanding officer who had spent 4 hours reading her AI's anomaly reports and decided direct interrogation was more efficient. She sat down on the crate across from him without asking. "Mako energy? Materia? Life stream?" She'd clearly been reviewing EDI's transcripts. "You're not from this galaxy." It wasn't a question. Cloud met her eyes. "No," he said. Shepard nodded, slow and even, the way someone nods when the impossible answer confirms what they already calculated. "Okay," she said. "Tell me what you can do." The elusive man learned about Cloud Strife 11 hours after the Normandy's hull was dented. He received the report the way he received most reports, in the dark, cigarette burning, Horizon's star painting his silhouette in cold blue while he read EDI's intercepted medical data on a holographic display. Cerberus had back channels into the Normandy systems that Shepard suspected but hadn't yet found. The elusive man had invested too much in that ship to fly blind. He read the Mako report twice. He read the materia energy readings 3 times. Then he made a call. Kai Lang was in the middle of something he considered important. The elusive man didn't acknowledge this. "There's someone on the Normandy who doesn't belong there," he said. "I want a full profile within 24 hours. Don't engage. Observe." The profile, when it arrived, was incomplete in ways that visibly irritated Cerberus's intelligence division. Cloud's origin point was unverifiable. His augmentations were unclassifiable. The energy readings from his equipment suggested capabilities that had no established ceiling. The analyst's final line read, "Subject's threat potential cannot be accurately assessed because no valid assessment framework exists for subject's capability set." The elusive man found this interesting rather than frustrating. Unknown ceilings were, in the right hands, simply unclaimed potential. Aboard the Normandy, Cloud was in the cargo hold, demonstrating to Garrus exactly why the materia situation had become urgent. He'd taken the thunder materia out carefully, held it in his palm, and focused. The orb flickered, sparked, and then discharged a bolt of lightning that skipped off the cargo bay floor, blew out a lighting panel, arced across a stack of supply containers, and terminated by fusing 2 of Garrus's spare rifle components together in a way that was genuinely impressive and completely irreversible. The silence afterward was considerable. Cloud said. Yeah, Garrus agreed, staring at his ruined components. EDI's voice came through the hold speakers immediately. The EZO particulate density in the cargo hold amplified the materia discharge by a factor of approximately 4.7. I would strongly recommend against using the red materia until we understand the interaction coefficient more thoroughly. Cloud looked at the red orb in the adjacent slot. Fire materia. He'd been planning to test it next. He closed his hand around it and did not test it. Shepard arrived to find Garrus holding melted rifle components with the expression of someone exercising significant emotional discipline. She looked at the burned floor. She looked at Cloud. She looked at EDI's camera in the corner, which had the decency to not say anything. No materia inside the ship, Shepard said. Agreed, Cloud said. EDI, can we vent the cargo hold? Reducing EZO particulate density in the hold by 90% would require approximately 6 hours of atmospheric recycling and would require Cloud to store the materia in a shielded container. I have already identified a suitable case in Storage Bay 3. Another brief pause. I prepared it an hour ago. Shepard looked at the camera again. You knew this was going to happen. I assessed it as highly probable, yes. Garrus set the melted rifle components down very carefully. I'm putting this on the anomaly report. It is already on the anomaly report, EDI said. It is, in fact, the anomaly report's new header item.
The shielded case EDI had prepared was a repurposed thermal clip storage container lined with a material that dampened electromagnetic interference. It wasn't designed for materia. Nothing in this galaxy was designed for materia. But it reduced the resonance bleed enough that Cloud could carry the orbs without the Normandy's EZO-rich atmosphere turning them into something unpredictable. He kept the restore materia outside the case. That one, at least, behaved. Mostly. Morden Solus found him in the cargo hold 3 days after the lightning incident, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the green orb balanced on his knee, running careful increments of healing energy through a cut on his forearm he'd made himself, testing. The wound knit at a rate that Morden's fingers twitched toward his datapad before he'd consciously decided to move. Fascinating, Morden said, which in his particular vocal cadence communicated approximately 17 layers of scientific hunger compressed into 3 syllables. Cellular regeneration externally stimulated, not nanite-based, not biotic, energy-based repair at the mitochondrial level. He was already circling. May I watch? Cloud looked at him. You're already watching. May I watch while taking notes? Cloud considered this. Fine. What followed was 2 hours that Morden later described to Shepard as among the most productive of his scientific career, which was a significant statement from a man who had contributed to a genophage modification. Cloud demonstrated the restore materia's range of function with the methodical patience of someone who had learned long ago that explaining his capabilities was faster than letting people draw wrong conclusions. Cure, cura, regen. Each function produced cellular effects that Morden cataloged with increasing velocity, his sentences shortening as his excitement compressed language into pure data delivery. Mako Enhanced Baseline accelerates materia effect. Materia channels biological energy, life stream energy, through user's own cellular structure. Interaction with EZO environment unpredictable for destructive materia, but restore materia's function is regenerative, not projective. Less interference. Makes sense, yes. He stopped pacing. Could theoretically apply to other crew members in field conditions. Cloud turned the orb over in his fingers. Back on Gaia, materia required attunement, a bond between user and orb that developed over time, through use, through something that might have been the life stream recognizing a compatible carrier.
He'd never tried to use restore materia on someone with no life stream connection whatsoever. "I don't know," he said honestly. Morden pointed at his own forearm. "Test." Cloud looked at him for a long moment. Morden's expression was one of absolute scientific fearlessness, the specific face of a man who had decided the data was worth the risk before the question was finished. Cloud pressed the orb to Morden's wrist and pushed a thread of cure energy through it. The green light bloomed. Morden went very still. His eyes widened by a fraction that, on his face, was the equivalent of someone else staggering backward. "Warm," he said quietly, "cellular, like being repaired from the inside." He checked his datapad. His readings were already updating. Extraordinary. Cloud pulled the materia back. The light faded. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "In the field, I can keep people alive longer if they let me close enough." Morden nodded, rapid and certain. "They will," he said, "once they see it work." Thane Krios prayed at 0400 every morning in the starboard observation deck, and he did it quietly enough that most of the crew had stopped noticing. Cloud had started sitting in the port observation deck at roughly the same hour for reasons he hadn't articulated to anyone, including himself. It took 4 days before they ended up in the same room. The Normandy had dropped out of FTL for a navigation correction, and the sudden stillness of the ship, no drive core vibration, no subtle hum of systems pushing against momentum, had apparently sent both of them to the same instinct. Cloud arrived to find Thane already there, hands folded, eyes open, watching the stationary stars. Cloud sat down on the opposite end of the bench without speaking. He wasn't good at speaking when it wasn't necessary. Neither, it turned out, was Thane. They sat in silence long enough that it became comfortable. "You carry them with you," Thane said eventually. Not a question. His eyes hadn't moved from the stars. Cloud looked at him sideways. "The dead," Thane said. "I can see it in the way you move, the weight people carry when they are outnumbered by their losses." He paused. "I recognize it because I carry the same weight." The observation deck was dark except for the stars and the faint blue trace of the drive core's ambient glow reaching down the corridor. Cloud was quiet for long enough that a different man might have filled the silence. Thane didn't. "Her name was Aerith," Cloud said finally. The name came out the way it always did, careful, like handling something that could still cut. "She died protecting something larger than herself. I wasn't fast enough." "Irika, my wife. I was not present. I was doing what I believed was necessary, and she died for my absence." His voice was composed in the specific way of someone who had made a long peace with grief without ever fully resolving it. "We tell ourselves the mission justified it. Sometimes we even believe it." "Does it get quieter?" Thane considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "No," he said, "but you learn to carry it without letting it steer. There is a difference between honoring the dead and being paralyzed by them." He looked at Cloud directly for the first time. "She would not want you paralyzed." Cloud said nothing, but something in his shoulders shifted, not releasing exactly, more like acknowledging. "The mission Shepard is running, it is a death mission. Every person aboard this ship knows it, and every person aboard has chosen to be here anyway." He paused. "I find that when I am surrounded by people who have made that choice knowingly, the weight becomes distributed, shared in a way I did not expect." Cloud looked out at the stars. Wrong constellations, wrong density, wrong galaxy. But the dark between them was the same dark it always was everywhere, the same absence, the same silence, the same waiting. "I've run suicide missions before." Cloud said. I know, Thane said. Shepard told us enough. A pause, quieter. How many did you walk away from? Cloud thought about Midgar, about the northern crater, about the forgotten city. All of them, he said. Thane nodded slowly. Then perhaps the weight you carry is also armor.
Horizon was supposed to be a resupply stop. It became something else approximately 4 minutes after the Normandy entered low orbit, when EDI's sensors detected a collector vessel running dark on the planet's far side, and Shepard made the particular face she made when a resupply stop became a war zone. Cloud went planetside with Garrus and Tali because Shepard had seen him move and made a tactical decision that she later described simply as, "He goes where the hardest fighting is." Garrus took point. Tali managed the Normandy's remote sentry deployment from a portable terminal. Cloud held the middle. The collector assault came through the colony's eastern agriculture district in force, 24 husks moving ahead of a collector advance unit with a scion anchoring the rear. Garrus dropped 3 with precise headshots before they crossed the fence line. Tali's combat drone detonated against a cluster of 4 more and scattered them. Cloud watched the gap close and did a rapid professional calculation. He pulled the Buster Sword and charged. The first collector that raised its weapon at him found the barrel sheared off before the trigger was pulled. The second found itself relocated 15 meters through a barn wall. Cloud moved through the unit with the focused efficiency of someone for whom this was not the worst thing he'd fought this week, which relative to collectors said something deeply uncomfortable about his previous week. The scion raised both arms and discharged a warp blast. Cloud dropped under it, closed the distance in 2 strides, and hit the scion with a braver that drove the Buster Sword through its torso from collar to hip. The impact rang across the district loud enough that Garrus stopped shooting to look. The scion fell in 2 separate directions. Silence. Garrus lowered his rifle. He looked at the bisected scion. He looked at Cloud, who was already pulling the sword clear with the same methodical calm he brought to everything. He looked at Tali. Right, Garrus said. His limit energy, Tali said, her voice carrying the focused curiosity she applied to all unfamiliar technology. When he attacked, did your sensors catch the energy spike? The scion's shields registered 0 dampening effect, EDI said through their comms. Cloud's attack bypassed the biotic shielding entirely. The energy output during the Braver strike is consistent with what I'd classify as a focused life stream discharge. Collector shielding has no framework to counter it because it has no framework to identify it. Cloud was scanning the tree line where the remaining collectors had retreated. He spoke without turning. They pulled back. Why? Collectors don't retreat, Garrus said slowly. They adjust, regroup, send something bigger. He checked his thermal clip. We should move. There's a signal coming from the colony center, survivors in a sealed structure. If we leave them, we don't leave them, Cloud said. It wasn't discussion. It was simply the next true thing, stated in the flat, declarative tone he used when a choice had already been made before the sentence started. Garrus recognized the tone because Shepard used it. He found it simultaneously reassuring and exhausting. They moved through the burning colony toward the signal, Cloud walking point now, Buster Sword resting across his shoulder, eyes tracking the smoke line. Behind them, the collector vessel's silhouette shifted in orbit, adjusting, regrouping. The elusive man's monitoring team logged the engagement and flagged Cloud's combat data with a single notation: conventional countermeasures ineffective. The Cerberus retrieval team arrived on Omega 6 days later, which told Cloud 2 things: that someone had been watching Horizon and that they'd needed nearly a week to build a plan they thought would work. He almost respected the optimism. Omega was exactly the kind of place Cloud recognized on instinct,
Not its architecture or its smell, which were uniquely terrible, but its social physics. A city that ran on leverage, information, and the implied threat of violence. Afterlife's music hit the docking bay like a physical object. The crowds moved with the particular fluid awareness of people who had survived long enough to develop peripheral vision as a survival skill. Shepard moved through it like she owned it. Cloud moved through it like he was waiting for something to go wrong. The retrieval team made their move in the market district, 4 in front, 2 on elevated positions, 1 blocking the exit corridor. Professional spacing, clean fields of fire, coordinated timing. Whoever planned it had clearly studied the horizon footage and concluded that overwhelming force and barrier fields would be sufficient. They hadn't studied it carefully enough. The barrier field hit Cloud and stopped, which surprised the team. The barrier field then cracked along its outer edge under the pressure of Cloud's continued forward movement, which alarmed the team. Cloud reached the nearest operative, took his weapon away, and used him to block the shot from the elevated position behind him, which demoralized the team considerably. Shepard handled 2. Garrus, positioned at Cloud's 3 o'clock, handled the elevated shooters with the mechanical precision of someone who found sniping meditative. The 6th operative, the one guarding the exit, looked at the situation, looked at Cloud walking toward him, and made a survivable decision. He ran. In the aftermath, Shepard pulled the Cerberus insignia from one of the fallen operative's armor and held it up without speaking. Cloud looked at it. "Your organization," he said. "Complicated," Shepard said, which was the most diplomatic word she owned for it. Cloud looked at the insignia for another moment. The design was clean, corporate, the aesthetic of an organization that had decided its own authority was beyond question, that the ends it had calculated were sufficient justification for whatever means it deployed. He'd seen that design philosophy before. Different logo, same architecture. "Shinra," he said quietly. Shepard looked at him. "Where I'm from," Cloud said, "a corporation. They decided humanity's survival required controlling the planet's core energy, extracting it, weaponizing it. Anyone who disagreed was a resource problem to be managed." He handed the insignia back. They built super soldiers, told them they were protecting humanity, used them until they broke. He paused. The elusive man, does he believe what he's doing is necessary? Shepard was quiet for a moment. Yes. Then he's more dangerous than someone who knows he's wrong. Conviction doesn't leave exits. Garrus had heard a lot of tactical wisdom delivered in a lot of registers over the years. He filed this one under accurate and uncomfortable. Shepard pocketed the insignia and started walking. "The elusive man won't send another team," she said. "Not yet. He'll recalculate." "And when he does?" Cloud asked. Shepard glanced back at him. "We'll be through the Omega-4 relay before it matters." The words landed with the specific gravity of a statement that was simultaneously a plan and a countdown.
The Omega-4 relay swallowed the Normandy whole. Cloud had survived a lot of transitions between states of being, materia summons, life stream immersion, the particular wrongness of Sephiroth's dimensional constructs in the northern crater. None of them felt like this. The relay's discharge hit the ship like a physical blow, and for 3 seconds every instrument on the Normandy flatlined simultaneously before EDI pulled them back from the edge of complete systems failure. The crew braced. Joker flew. Cloud stood in the cargo hold with one hand on the Buster Sword's hilt and felt something reach toward him through the hull. Not the life stream. Something older, something that had been consuming life for longer than humanity had been building fires. The collector base materialized around them like a revelation made of bone and metal, vast, asymmetrical, constructed from the harvested remains of things that had once been people. Cloud looked at it through the cargo hold's viewport and felt his jaw tighten.
He'd seen Hojo's labs. He'd seen what Shinra built when it stopped pretending humans were anything other than resources. This was that philosophy taken to its terminal conclusion, scaled to a size that made ideology look like architecture. Cloud, Shepard's voice through the comms was controlled and immediate. You're with me and Garrus. Thane takes the second team to the thermal exhaust. Tali keeps the Normandy breathing. We have one run at this. He was already moving. The base's interior was worse than the exterior. Corridors lined with processing pods, each one containing a colonist suspended in amber fluid at various stages of harvesting. Cloud moved through it with the tight, contained fury of someone who had learned that anger was most useful when it was quiet. Garrus was scanning ahead. Shepard was driving forward with the fixed momentum of someone who had already accepted the cost of this mission and was now simply executing. Then Cloud felt it. Not heard, not saw, felt. A presence pressing against the edge of his awareness the way Sephiroth's consciousness had pressed in the moments before full manifestation, vast and cold and utterly certain of its own supremacy, not identical, but rhyming. The Reaper intelligence controlling this base had noticed something unusual moving through its structure and was focusing on it the way a predator focuses on movement that doesn't match the prey it knows. The Harbinger-directed collector dropped from the ceiling directly in front of him, eyes blazing with possessed gold light, assuming direct control. Cloud hit it with Omni-Slash before the sentence finished. The limit break detonated through the chamber in a sequence of strikes that moved faster than the collector's possessed reflexes could track. 15 impacts in 4 seconds, life stream energy bleeding from each contact point like light from a wound. The Harbinger-possessed collector came apart in ways that conventional weaponry simply didn't produce. When Cloud landed, the chamber was silent, and the presence in his head had pulled back, not retreated, but reassessing, recalculating. Shepard was staring. "Bro-Shep," Garrus said quietly, which wasn't his name but communicated something important regardless. "We need to move fast before it sends something bigger." Cloud rolled his shoulder. The life stream energy was burning hotter than usual in this place, reacting to the concentrated death surrounding them. Every harvested pod was a resonance point, trapped life, interrupted cycle, the life stream equivalent of a scream held permanently mid-note. He understood suddenly and completely why the Reapers had to be stopped. "Lead," he told Shepard. She led. The base died loudly. Shepard hit the final terminal with 20 seconds to spare, and the detonation sequence that followed was the kind of controlled catastrophe that required everyone to run in the same direction and not ask questions until they were back on the Normandy. Cloud ran. Garrus ran. The surviving crew ran. Joker held position with the specific stubbornness of a pilot who had decided the ship was leaving with everyone aboard or not at all. They made it with 4 seconds remaining, which Joker later said was comfortable and which everyone else agreed to never discuss again. The Normandy punched through the base's outer structure as it collapsed inward, debris streaking past the viewports in sheets of burning metal and disrupted energy. Cloud watched it from the cargo hold viewport, the massive structure folding into itself, the collector architecture crumbling in a cascade that carried something else with it. He could feel the harvested dead releasing, not the life stream. There was no life stream here, but something analogous, an unbinding. The colonist's cycle, interrupted and held captive, completing itself at last. He pressed one hand flat against the viewport glass and said nothing. Behind him, the cargo hold slowly filled with crew members who had survived the unsurvivable and were processing that fact in the particular silence that follows when your body understands it's still alive before your mind catches up. Tali sat down heavily on a supply crate. Garrus leaned against the bulkhead and closed his eyes. Morden was already reviewing his biometric recordings with the focused attention of a man using science as emotional regulation. Shepard found Cloud at the viewport. They stood together for a moment without speaking, watching the debris field expand and cool in the dark. "You felt something in there," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen his face in the chamber after the Omni-Slash. Something like Sephiroth. Not the same, but built on the same certainty, that it was beyond consequence, that it had already won. He paused. Things that believe that are always the most dangerous and always the most wrong. Shepard was quiet for a moment. "The Reapers are coming, all of them. What happened here was one base. What's coming is a fleet that's been doing this to civilizations for 50,000 years." Cloud looked at the cooling debris. Back on Gaia, he had stood in the wreckage of Midgar and understood that winning one battle didn't mean the planet was healed. The work after the victory was longer and harder and less clearly defined than the fight itself. "I know," he said. Shepard looked at him sideways. "You're still here." The words landed as both observation and question. Cloud considered them with the same careful weight he gave to things that mattered. He was stranded in a galaxy that had no life stream, no Tifa, no seventh heaven, no Marlene asking him when he'd be back. He had a sword, 7 materia, and a crew of people who had chosen to walk into certain death because the alternative was worse. He had been here before. Not this place, this feeling. "I'm still here," he said. Outside, the terminus stars burned cold and indifferent in their millions. Somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in the dark spaces between everything, something vast and ancient registered the base's destruction and began moving in response. Fleets repositioning, contingencies activating, the machinery of an extinction-level intelligence turning its attention toward a small, fast ship and the anomaly aboard it that its models could not yet classify. The Normandy accelerated into FTL, carrying its impossible passenger deeper into a war that was only beginning.
Cloud Strife had saved a planet once. He knew what it cost. The collector base was ash behind them. The immediate threat neutralized, the colonists' stolen future finally released. By any measure, the Normandy's crew had done the impossible. Shepard would file her report. The elusive man would read it in the dark and recalculate. The Council would dismiss it and be wrong. The galaxy would continue turning, mostly unaware of how close the machinery of its extinction had come to completing its next cycle. Cloud sat in the cargo hold with the Buster Sword across his knees and the materia case open beside him. Each orb settled in its slot, glowing faintly in the recycled air. The restore materia pulsed with steady green light. Somewhere above him, Thane was probably watching stars. Morden was probably writing. Garrus was probably cleaning a rifle he hadn't fired yet, because cleaning rifles was how Garrus Vicarian told the universe he was still present. He understood these people now. Not completely. Not the way you understood people you'd grown up alongside, people who shared your sky and your history. But enough. The specific enough that mattered. The shape of how they carried their losses, the reasons they kept moving, the thing that made them walk through the Omega-4 relay knowing the odds. He'd walked into worse odds for less. The Reapers were coming. The galaxy had no idea how to stop them. Cloud had survived one god's certainty that the world deserved to end, and he had learned something from it that no Spectre or Shadow Broker report contained. Sometimes the only answer to something that believes it's inevitable is someone who simply refuses to agree. He closed the materia case. He picked up the Buster Sword. He had work to do. May the Force be with you. More stories await.